Whatever we decide about the specific burdens of the past, we have to ask how much of current wealth inequality is due to existing racism and to existing policies that make it harder for black families to build wealth. And the only way to get answers to those questions is to have a dispassionate discussion about facts. And the problem with the social activism we're now seeing, what John McWhorter calls the new religion of anti-racism, is that it finds racism nearly everywhere, even where it manifestly does not exist. And this is incredibly damaging to the cause of achieving real equality in our society. It's almost impossible to exaggerate the evil and injustice of slavery and its aftermath. But it is possible to exaggerate how much racism currently exists at an Ivy League university, or in Silicon Valley, or at the Oscars. And those exaggerations are toxic. And perversely, they may produce more real racism. It seems to me that false claims of victimhood can diminish the social stature of any group, even a group that has a long history of real victimization. The imprecision here, the bad faith arguments, the double standards, the goalpost shifting, the idiotic opinion pieces in the New York Times, the defenestrations on social media, the general hysteria that the cult of wokeness has produced. I think this is all extremely harmful to civil society and to effective liberal politics and to the welfare of African Americans. The future we want is not one in which we've all become passionate anti-racists. It's not a future in which we're forever on our guard against the slightest insult, the bad joke, the awkward compliment, the tweet that didn't age well. We want to get to a world in which skin color and other superficial characteristics of a person become morally and politically irrelevant. And if you don't agree with that, what did you think Martin Luther King Jr. was talking about? And finally, if you're on the left and you don't agree with that, if you don't agree with this vision of a post-racial future, please observe that the people who agree with you, the people who believe that there is no overcoming race, and that racial identity is indissoluble, and that skin color really matters and will always matter, these people are white supremacists and neo-Nazis and other total assholes. So the question for the rest of us, those of us who want to build a world populated by human beings merely, the question is, how do we get there? How does racial difference become uninteresting? Can it become uninteresting by more and more people taking a greater interest in it? Can it become uninteresting by becoming a permanent political identity? Can it become uninteresting by having thousands of institutions whose funding, and therefore very survival, depends on it remaining interesting until the end of the world? Can it become less significant by being granted more and more significance? By becoming a fetish, a sacred object, ringed on all sides by taboos? Can race become less significant if you can lose your reputation and even your livelihood at any moment by saying one wrong word about it? Now, I think these questions answer themselves. To outgrow our obsession with racial difference, we have to outgrow our obsession with race. And you don't do that by maintaining your obsession with it. We're paying an intolerable price for confusion about racism and social justice generally, and the importance of identity generally. And this is happening in an environment where the path to success and power for historically disadvantaged groups isn't generally barred by white racists who won't vote for them, or hire them, or celebrate their achievements, or buy their products. and it isn't generally barred by laws and policies and norms that are unfair. Now, there is surely still some of that, but there must be less of it now than there ever was. The real burden on the Black community is the continued legacy of inequality with respect to wealth and education and health and social order, levels of crime in particular, and the resulting levels of incarceration and single-parent families. And it seems very unlikely that these disparities, whatever their origin in the past, can be solved by focusing on the problem of lingering racism, especially where it doesn't exist. And the current problem of police violence seems a perfect case in point. And yet now we're inundated with messages from every well-intentioned company and organization singing from the same book of hymns. I mean, Black Lives Matter is everywhere. Of course, Black Lives Matter. But the messaging of this movement around the reality of police violence is wrong, and it's creating a public hysteria. I mean, I just got a message from the American Association for the Advancement of Science talking about fear of the other. Right? And the quote from the email is, "Left unchecked, racism, sexism, homophobia, and fear of the other can enter any organization or community and destroy the foundations upon which we must build our future." Okay, fine. But is that really the concern in the scientific community right now? Unchecked racism, sexism, and homophobia? Is that really what ails science in the year 2020? I don't think so. Now, I'll tell you the fear of the other that does seem warranted everywhere right now. It's the other who has rendered him or herself incapable of dialogue. It's the other who will not listen to reason, who has no interest in facts, who can't join a conversation that converges on the truth because he knows in advance what the truth must be. We should fear the other who thinks that dogmatism and cognitive bias aren't something to be corrected for because they're the very foundations of his epistemology. We should fear the other who can't distinguish activism from journalism or politics from science, or worse, can make these distinctions but refuses to. And we're all capable of becoming this person, if only for minutes or hours at a time. And we have to continually correct for it. The disparities in our society are absolutely heartbreaking and unacceptable. And we need a rational discussion about their actual causes and solutions. We have to pull back from the brink here. And all we have with which to do that is conversation. I mean, the only thing that makes conversation possible is an openness to evidence and arguments, a willingness to update one's view of the world when better reasons are given. And that is an ongoing process, not a place we ever finally arrive.